again for your patience with our well-to-do litigious friends back there. But a lot of times people ask me about this bridge here on the left. It's just kind of going up to nowhere all by itself up in the air. That bridge was built in 1908 as part of the old Galena-Chicago rail line. The rail line does not exist anymore. That particular set of tracks used to run straight to the merchandise mart. But if you looked at the other side of the river, where that bridge is supposed to connect with land, that's just not very high up. It doesn't provide clearance for boats like us to go back and forth. So rather than spend the money and tear that old bridge down, they just leave it there doing what it's doing. And now a hot thing to do when you get married in Chicago is have some wedding photos taken from the Kinsey Street Bridge directly behind us, because from that angle, you have this old Galena Bridge and, eyes forward, Sears Tower in the background. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that the Kinsey Street Bridge all by itself is a very fitting place to have a wedding photo taken, because John Kinsey was the first person in Chicago to perform a marriage ceremony. So whether they're aware of it or not, they're doing something that's historically relevant, but try telling that to a bridezilla. That does not work. So a lot of construction. Basically the gist of what's happening here on the left, this plot of land is called Wolf Point. The plan is for 3 separate buildings, 50, 70, 90 stories. They say they're going to have that wrapped up by 2016. I'm starting to think they just meant the one building thus far, and then it's going to go in stages from there. But it's going to be really nice. It's going to be like a giant mixed-use complex. So we're talking office space, residential, retail / restaurants, and they also say they're going to incorporate a nice little park area here. So that's going to be a really nice development when it's all said and done, because what it used to be was the world's ugliest parking garage. So anything they do is going to be an improvement, right? And before I forget, I haven't been on this boat in a while. I do love this boat. This is the favorite boat that we have, or that I've been on, that we have. And but the trade-off is it sits really low in the water. So you guys can help me out and check out the green building that's across the way from us now, off to the left there, that nice big green building. You can focus on the bottom section for me, please. And just remember the green building has columns. There's columns that flank the front doors and hold up its bottom corners. Just green building columns. When we come back around, you're not going to be able to see the columns from that angle, but I promise you I'm going to make it make sense. It's all going to work in the end, okay? Green building columns. Thank you in advance for that. That being said, the next point I need to make is that all the buildings I would like to show you on the right-hand side of the South Branch have one thing in common. That is that they're all constructed in a manner known as air rights construction. And, hold on, it's going to get really loud for a second here. What air rights construction is all about is, yes, there's more construction happening over here, but underneath all that, there's tons and tons of train tracks at ground level, and the train tracks all end up disappearing underneath the upcoming buildings. People like Metra and Amtrak that own the trains also own the land the tracks are on. They can't resell the land for construction development because that would negate them owning it in the first place. Whoever bought the land, if they wanted to, could tear up all the train tracks, block them with a building, whatever they wanted to do. To make some money, train people got smart. They started selling the airspace above the train tracks. Then what they do is take these big, huge pillars called caissons, drive the caissons very deeply into the ground to act like giant stilts, build a platform above the stilts, buildings go up normally from there, allowing the trains to continue on their tracks to and from the train stations underneath all these buildings. Air rights construction is a fairly simple process when it's all said and done. The exception to that simplicity would be the Boeing building here on the right. Boeing was built in 1990 by Perkins and Will. They sit partially above switching tracks. Switching tracks is when there's a whole bunch of railroad tracks, but they're all right next to each other. So there's no space in between them to put any caissons into the ground to support the southwest corner of this building from underneath. They had to go from up above. They put trusses on the outside lower portion of the Boeing building. The trusses hold up that southwest corner and redistribute the weight to the other 3 corners of the building. After we clear this next bridge, give it a couple seconds, but after the bridge, if you'd like to look behind you, you'll be able to see they left the trusses exposed. Ralph Johnson was the lead architect. He chose to leave the trusses uncovered to remind you of all the fabulous steelwork of the bridges along the Chicago River. It's a pretty nifty feat of engineering up there at Boeing, to be sure. You can kind of think of it like a giant shopping bag handle, or if you desperately need a visual aid, I can hold my backpack up by the top handle like this. That's essentially what's happening up there. That's one big handle holding up the southwest corner up there. And that'll bring us here on the right to 2 North Riverside Plaza, built in 1929 by Halliburton Root. First building in Chicago to use air rights construction. Originally, this building is home to the Chicago Daily News, the newspaper. So all the pictures that you see etched in along the side of the building up there, they all depict scenes from the history of printing. So you got Gutenberg, the printing press, stuff like that. Now that we're over here, you'll be able to see underneath these next buildings. So you'll see some trains, you'll see some caissons, and hopefully that'll give you a better sense of how air rights construction all actually works. It's not too bad under there right now, volume-wise. You have to believe me when I tell you it can get ridiculously loud out here on weekdays during rush hour with all the various train traffic. Basically, the noise comes out of that wall, bounces off the water, bounces off the opposite wall. It's just one big circular cacophony of train noise. All these buildings have superb soundproofing. Starting with this first building we're passing on the right and continuing with the next few, these buildings comprise what we call Gateway Center. They have super duper creative names like Gateways 1, 2, 3, and Steve. Yeah, it's bored. First I have to see if anybody's still paying attention. Good job, everybody. Secondly, smiling makes it better for everybody, I promise. But if you're not getting a good enough look at Gateway 1, not to worry. Gateways 1 and 2 are identical glass and steel 20-story boxes, built in 1965 and 67 respectively by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. These are the epitome of modern architecture. If you want to go home and impress your friends with newfound snooty architectural lingo, you refer to this style of building as Miese. Earlier we talked a little bit about Ludwig Mies van der Rohe in conjunction with the IBM building, he being the father of modern architecture. Even though Mies van der Rohe had absolutely nothing to do with the design plans for those buildings, the way that he felt about architectural design was very influential. And Mies's philosophy was pretty simple. Boils down to the idea of less is more. Meaning the less ornamentation and decorations you put on the outside of a building, the more form and function you are able to afford to put on the inside. Coming up ahead of us on the right, we'll have a little building with giant X's on the outside of it. That's the old Commodities Exchange. This one is a great way to show you how the Hancock building was constructed, but obviously on a much smaller scale. It's just like the Hancock, both of them were designed by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, but neither this building nor the Hancock has columns inside holding up the different floors or the ceiling for that matter. Giant X's on the outside of both buildings, they're not for decoration, they're structural. They're called cross bracings. And the cross bracings hold up the buildings from the outside, so the outside of the building does all the work, and then on the inside, you get extra square footage because there's no columns. Pretty ingenious. So Gateway number 4, after this bridge on the right, was built in 1983. And Gateway 4 is a good example of contextualism. Contextual architecture is when a building takes into consideration its site and its surroundings. So this one is a gentle curve that follows a natural bend in the river, and it uses green tinted glass windows like a lot of other buildings along the river to mimic the natural color of the water. We do dye this river really bright green for St. Patrick's Day. It's not a myth, it happens every year. But the river is naturally this pale shade of green because of the clay bottom, the algae that grows on it, and the infusion of Lake Michigan water. My favorite part when they dye the river green is the seagulls. They float in it for a little bit, fly back up, bright green belly. It's hilarious. Next up on the right, another behemoth of a building. As we go underneath this bridge, you can look down the block and see how far down it goes. This is the old Central Post Office, built in 1932 by Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. When it was in operation, this is the largest post office in the world. We needed that much space because Chicago was once home to a lot of mail order catalog businesses like Sears and Roebuck. If you're old enough like me and remember when we used to get those catalogs in the mail, especially at Christmas, they were huge. That's why they needed 2.7 million square feet of floor space. As the catalog companies started moving out of the city and into the suburbs, we were left with this big, rambling building that became inefficient simply because it was so large. Inefficient is code for they were losing people's mail. So shut her down in 1996 and built a new one. You might recognize the old post office if you're fans of the Batman movies filmed here. For example, The Dark Knight. They used the old post office as the bank that they robbed at the beginning of the film. And if you've seen the third Transformers, they filmed a lot here in 2010. Me and Shia LaBeouf had a fling. They used the post office as the Department of Health and Human Services. I don't know why you guys are laughing at that. You don't know me. A lot going on over here. Kind of a big deal. I can't hear the straight face anymore. All right, so I know the post office rundown. It's a post office, so it belonged to the federal government. That's a lot of red tape, and there's been a lot of talk over the years. What's going to happen to that beautiful historic building? Oh, 2005, I got excited. Big rumor was they were going to turn it into a casino. Oh, I was jazzed. Well, they shot that down. I cried a little bit. They did finally sell it a few years ago to Bill Davies for about $26 million. Oh, you guys, there's been more articles written about this post office in the last 5 years than Gandhi and the Beatles combined. I'm not kidding. I could spend a half an hour going through the what ifs and what could have beens and the plans and this and that and the other. Suffice it to say, I'm treating it like a que sera situation at this point. It's going to be whatever it's going to be, regardless of how many articles I read. So I'm just kind of like, let's just figure out exactly what it's going to be, and then we'll worry about it then. So we shall see. Hopefully something soon. It'd be nice to see some life breathed into that old post office once again. We're right next door to the old post office. So they built the new post office. Makes it easy for the tour guides. New post office was built in 1996 by Knight and Associates. It's about a quarter of the size of the old one, and it's also fully automated, so they're very efficient. Should anybody need a location for your upcoming wedding or bar mitzvah, you can rent out the lobby of the new post office. Yeah, I don't know why either, but you can. That's the end of that story, I promise. This part of the South Branch is a very opportune time to talk to you about the Great Chicago Fire. On the evening of October 8th, 1871, a huge fire broke out a little bit south and west of here and leveled Chicago. Almost 5 square miles burnt to the ground. That included 17,420 buildings. Sadly, that night, 300 people lost their lives, and about 100,000 people, a third of the population, became instantly homeless. A disaster of that magnitude, a lot of things came together that night to make it happen the way that it did. We had a drought all summer long. Everything around here was bone dry. Not a good situation considering things back then around here were made out of wood. Houses, sidewalks, and to top it off, this is where most of the lumber yards were. So imagine big wooden buildings filled with yet more wood. Then you take into account human error. There used to be gentlemen that would sit up in towers called fire spotters. They saw a fire start, they'd ring an alarm, send the firefighters off in the appropriate direction. The guy working that night, bless his heart, he worked the day before. There was a fire the previous day in about that spot. So when he looked in the distance and saw the smoke start to rise, he went, nah, it's just smoldering from yesterday, and ignored it. Looked back again, realized his mistake, rang the alarm. Oh, the poor fella. He accidentally sent the firefighters in the wrong direction. Talk about a bad day. By the time they got back over here, it was just too late. The fire was burning out of control, and then a wind kicked up just right to carry the fire across the river. It literally jumped the river. Not once, but twice. That's how the fire was able to spread so far and cause $222 million worth of damage. That's 1871 money. I was a language major in college. I can't do that kind of math, but that's a lot of cash today. So this really was a huge disaster. At the same time, though, we now had a completely clean slate. Architects and engineers came from all over the world to help us rebuild. And by then, mankind had figured out how to manipulate steel. So now we could make steel frame buildings that were much, much lighter than their predecessors, masonry frame buildings. And considering that this whole city is built upon what was once a perfectly good swamp, the buildings being lighter meant we could now build up higher and higher into the sky. So Chicago, it's called the birthplace of the skyscraper. William LeBaron Jenney designed the home insurance building here in 1884. That was the first all-steel frame building above 10 stories. It got bigger and better from there. Without the Great Chicago Fire, we would not have the city that we do today, nor would we have the most amazing, breathtakingly beautiful, awe-inspiring, world-renowned skyline that we do today. And as we turn around here, you get a great view of a very special part of that skyline. Sears Tower in the background, tallest building in Chicago. I refuse to call it the Willis Tower. Let's not start with that. In front of the Sears Tower right now, there's a pink building with a giant glass crown at the top. That one's known by its address, 311 South Wacker. Just remember the glass crown. I'll tell you a story about it in a few minutes. So go ahead, you guys, get some pictures, and I'll get back to you when we get turned around. Oh yeah, the bar's up until there too.